Yevish said to them, "If Elohim were your father, you would love me. For I came forth from Elohim and am here. For I have not come of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not know what I say? Because you are unable to hear my word. You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you wish to do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and has not stood in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks the lie, he speaks of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. And because I speak the truth, you do not believe me? Who of you proves me wrong concerning sin? And if I speak the truth, why do you not believe me? He who is of Elohim hears the words of Elohim. Therefore you do not hear, because you are not of Elohim."
Warning: the following video contains strong language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Their monthly allowance of food and their yearly clothing. The men and women slaves received, as their monthly allowance of food, 8 pounds of pork, or its equivalent in fish, and 1 bushel of cornmeal. Their yearly clothing consisted of 2 coarse linen shirts, 1 pair of linen trousers, like the shirts, 1 jacket, 1 pair of trousers for winter, made of coarse Negro cloth, 1 pair of stockings, and 1 pair of shoes. The whole of which could not have cost more than $7. The allowance of the slave children was given to their mothers, or the old women having the care of them. The children unable to work in the field had neither shoes, stockings, jackets, nor trousers given to them. Their clothing consisted of 2 coarse linen shirts per year. When these failed them, they went naked until the next allowance day. Children from 7 to 10 years old, of both sexes, almost naked, might be seen at all seasons of the year. There were no beds given the slaves unless 1 coarse blanket be considered such, and none but the men and women had these. This, however, is not considered a very great privation. They find less difficulty from the want of beds than from the want of time to sleep, for when their day's work in the field is done, the most of them having their washing, mending, and cooking to do, and having few or none of the ordinary facilities for doing either of these, very many of their sleeping hours are consumed in preparing for the field the coming day. And when this is done, old and young, male and female, married and single, drop down side by side on 1 common bed, the cold, damp floor, each covering himself or herself.
You know, like a lot of people be telling me, "Dave, you know, you just gotta relax. The racism thing be bugging you too much." And I be thinking about it. Sometimes shit'll happen. You know, a lot of black people can relate to this. Have you ever had something happen that was so racist that you didn't even get mad? You were just like, "God damn, that was racist." I mean, it was so blatant. You were just like, "Wow." It happened to me. I was in Mississippi. I was in Mississippi doing a show, and I go to the restaurant to order some food, and I say to the guy, I say, "I would like to have," and before I even finish my sentence, he says, "the chicken." I said, "What the fuck?" I could not believe it. Could not believe that shit. This man was absolutely right. I said, how did he know that I was gonna get some chicken?
Who's got time to make dinner when you're busy making history? Colonel Sanders' Kentucky Fried Chicken tastes great, and it's so convenient. You can pick it up whenever you want it. Cleopatra didn't stop to fix dinner. Why should you? You make history. We'll make dinner. Colonel Sanders already made history by fixing Sunday dinners 7 days a week.
I thought you were going to surprise your mom and cook dinner.
Oh, I was, Papa. But it turned out to be a bad day for cooking.
Oh?
Well, first I put the salt in the pepper shaker. Then I dialed the wrong number. Twice.
Folks like my Kentucky Fried Chicken so much is they think up excuses not to cook. My secret recipe makes it so finger-licking good that it's hard to think of cooking or eating anything else.
And I couldn't find my diary either.
Well, for chicken's sake, I hope you never do.
Come on over and visit the Colonel.
Hey, kids! Hi!
As a doctor, I took an oath to do no harm. And today I stand here because there is harm being done to millions. I stand here because I must speak out. We know all too well the visible forms of racism in our society. We know the inequities in income and opportunity. We know the brutal violence and discrimination of the police. We know the shooting of black children. We know the name of Tamir Rice. We know the name of unarmed black men shot in the back. We know the name of Stephon Clark. But what we don't know, we may not know, are the names of millions of African Americans killed by an invisible form of racism, a silent and insidious injustice. This is an often internalized force of racism and oppression that disproportionately affects the poor and African American communities. We do know that 1.3% of all deaths are caused by gun violence, and it is real, and it is tragic, and it must end. But we may not know that 70% of deaths are caused by chronic disease, the result mostly of our toxic food system. More African Americans are killed by food than by anything else. The science is clear. Our processed, sugary, starchy diet is the single biggest cause of death and disease: type 2 diabetes, obesity, heart disease, stroke, high blood pressure, cancer, and even dementia. Our food system is the deadliest weapon used against the poor and minorities, keeping them poor and fat and sick, hijacking their brains and their biology. We are told that it is our personal choice, that being fat results from eating too much and not exercising enough. That blames the victim. The subliminal message is it's your fault you're fat and sick. We may think what we eat is a personal choice, that is rooted in our cultural heritage and our family customs, but we know that the food industry designs our food to be addictive, that they hire craving experts that work in taste institutes to create what they call the bliss point of food, all with the purpose of creating heavy users. These are their own internal corporate terms. What if I told you that the food industry specifically targets the poor and minorities? That it's easier to get someone drinking a 20-ounce soda to start drinking a 2-liter bottle of soda? Research shows that African American kids drink twice as much as white kids. What if I told you that sugar and processed foods were more addictive than cocaine, and that the food industry has hijacked our brain chemistry, our taste buds, our metabolism, our bodies, and our minds? When our foods are biologically addictive, the notion of personal choice is a fiction. It blames the victims for their choices. How can we take care of 20 of our communities when 23 million Americans live in food deserts, where the only food available is processed junk from convenience stores, from fast food outlets, and the closest grocery store is more than a mile away, where it's hard to find fresh fruits and vegetables or healthy food? And the problem isn't only food deserts, it's food swamps. Communities filled with fast food chains and bodegas applying highly processed addictive foods. They sell gallon cups of soda and other sugar-loaded beverages. There are fast food chains planting burgers, fries, and fried chicken on almost every street corner. We know that your zip code is more important than your genetic code in determining your risk of death and disease. And we also know that our food system is the #1 cause of climate change. And what about our kids? 40% of them are overweight. We now see 3-year-olds with type 2 diabetes, what we used to call adult onset diabetes. We're told that our kids' behavior problems are from bad parenting. Well, the research shows that African American kids are far less likely to graduate from high school or go to college. But if our children go to school with a breakfast of Coke or colored sugar water or Doritos or flaming hot chips, how can we expect them to focus and pay attention? These are not foods. These are food-like substances with no nutritional benefit. This diet creates an achievement gap because kids are too sick to learn, and it affects far more kids of color than any other group. These kids are less likely to go to college, to earn good incomes, and more likely to get sick and die young. 1 in 10 of our kids are on ADD medication, and the science shows that the junk our kids eat is a big part of that cause. The food industry spends $10 billion a year marketing junk food to our kids. The average kid sees 6,000 ads for junk food on soda on TV and even more on social media. These companies are junk food pushers. Do you really think it was a coincidence that Paula Abdul and all her judges on the American Idol had 24-ounce containers of Coca-Cola in front of them every show? The top sports stars receive tens of millions of dollars from soda and fast food giants to promote their products to our children who idolize them. Yet it doesn't have to be that way. Charter schools in the poorest, most disadvantaged communities of color who feed kids 2 to 3 healthy meals a day find that the kids are more likely to go to college than go to jail. We incarcerate African Americans at 5 times the rate of white Americans. Much of that is a result of racial profiling and targeting by police and the judicial system. But it could be that much of that violent crime is a result of our diet that robs our minds, affects our thinking and judgment, and our ability to make good choices. Now, you may think that sounds too far-fetched, but studies have shown that by feeding violent prisoners in prison healthy diets, that violent crime goes down by 56%, and that when you add a multivitamin, because they're all nutritionally deficient, it goes down by 80%. Violent crime in prison goes down by 80%. We know that the task of ending mass incarceration and the new Jim Crow is complex and urgent. We know that the task of building a just food system is also complex and urgent. We have to build a new food system together. A part of this task is listening to the voices of those directly affected by our toxic food system. I once received a letter from prison from a murderer who changed his diet in prison and realized that his whole life of eating junk had made him violent, and from eating real food in the prison transformed him into a totally different person. The food industry employs nefarious tactics to prevent change. They buy friends, they silence critics, and they sweeten their profits. I was part of a documentary. It's called Fed Up. It's a movie about how the food system makes us sick and fat with addictive, sugary, starchy products. And I met with Bernice King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, about this. And she explained to me that nonviolence also includes nonviolence to ourselves and our own bodies. She was excited about showing the movie Fed Up at the King Center. A few days later, I got a call saying they couldn't show the film. Why? I asked. The answer? Coca-Cola funds the King Center. The dean of Spelman College in Atlanta told me that 50% of the entering class of African American women has a chronic disease. 50%, type 2 diabetes, hypertension, obesity. I asked her why there are Coke machines and fountains all over campus. Coca-Cola is one of the biggest donors to the college. The NAACP received $2.1 million from Coca-Cola alone since 1996. Coca-Cola also funded the Hispanic Federation. Is it any surprise that the NAACP and Hispanic groups oppose a soda tax? We cannot stand for this. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter." We can no longer be silent about this. If you're African American, you are 80% more likely to have type 2 diabetes, or 4 times as likely to have kidney failure from it, and 3.5 times more likely to suffer amputations as whites. Yet we remain silent about the role of the food system killing millions of Americans. They tell us it's a personal choice. Nonsense. And big food also corrupts public health and advocacy groups. They fund hunger groups like the Food Research and Action Center and Feeding America. These hunger groups strongly oppose limiting the use of food stamps or SNAP to buy soda, despite the fact that the single biggest line item on our food stamp bill, $7 billion a year, is soda. That's 20 billion servings a year of soda to the poor. Soda and sugar-sweetened beverages are the single biggest cause of obesity and type 2 diabetes. There is no scientific argument against that. Our bodies, our health, our children, our communities have been taken from us, and it's time we take them back. It's time we say no to big food and institutionalized food injustice that's causing this slow-motion genocide. It's time to free ourselves from corporate interests that privatize profits and socialize the cost of their products. Taking back our food and our food system is a revolutionary act. There are things we can't change as individuals, but we all eat. We vote 3 times a day with our fork. The single biggest political act and the single biggest act of self-love, of rebuilding our communities, is to choose real food. So what is real food? Well, it's pretty simple. Next time you pick up something to eat, ask yourself this question. Did God make this, or did man make this? Did God make Doritos and a Coke? No. Did God make an egg or broccoli? Yes. And think about it. If Jesus came to dinner, what would you feed him? A Big Mac, fries, and a Coke? Or would you give him some real food? We can teach our kids, and we can teach ourselves how to choose and eat food that brings life and not death. Big food would have you believe that it's expensive, that it's difficult, that it takes too much time. Don't believe them. It's not true. We need to educate our kids, ourselves, and our communities. We have to do this together. We can only do this together. Black lives matter, yes, and black health matters too.
In 1997, Tiger Woods won his first Masters tournament, becoming the first black golfer to win a Masters. But that wasn't the history that many remember. The history itself involved Fuzzy Zoeller, a golfer who has won the Masters in previous years, one of them being in his first tournament that he ever did.
Impressive. Little boy's driving it well, he's putting well, he's doing everything it takes to win. So you know what you guys do when he gets in here? Pat him on the back, say congratulations, enjoy it, and tell him not to serve fried chicken next year. Got it. Right.
Zoeller didn't have to say a racial slur or say much of anything in this interview. However, the stereotype that he placed in the interview sent shockwaves throughout the world. This was a hard one to trace down and understand how fried chicken, America's favorite food, was seen as a stereotype directed solely at African Americans. To understand a bit deeper, we have to go back to the most problematic movie to ever exist, D.W. Griffin's Birth of a Nation. In the scene, where Congress is led mostly by African Americans, there are scenes where blacks are unruly, drinking, taking off their shoes, and in a very telling instance, eating fried chicken while presumably talking to the members of Congress. Many credit this movie to create many stereotypes, some that we discuss much later in this series. In 1925, Maxim Lester Graham opened a chicken restaurant in Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Spokane, Washington, and Salt Lake City called Coon Chicken Inn. It was a restaurant that focused heavily on the black minstrel industry, and in order to go into the restaurant, you had to enter through the mouth of a black man.
Down home. At the Coon Chicken Inn, we aim to please. The best 100% mammy-made family-style meals. You can taste the love.
I like the white meat. I'm a breast man.
We just love it here. You'll just keep hollering, gal, fetch me some more. Look for that wide-mouthed coon near you.
Coon Chicken Inn. Many restaurants lean into the fried chicken stereotype towards African Americans.
Well, you're stuck here. Where is here? This is Lake Edna.
Hammer.
Wait a minute.
Like it?
That's that new KFC honey barbecue chicken.
Fried chicken, something new in Lake Edna or your neck of the woods.
Popeyes is cooking. That spicy chicken.
Celebrate 88 at Popeyes. Till January 9th, 1988, you can get 2 pieces of spicy, delicious Popeyes chicken and a biscuit for just 88 cents when you buy a medium soft drink.
Burger King.
Oh, what's in those new chicken snack wraps?
What's in the new chicken snack?
chicken wraps? Mary?
Crispy chicken, fresh lettuce, 3 cheeses, fresh dressing wrapped up in tasty.
Popeye's spokeswoman, Annie, can be seen by many as a modern mammy character right down to her speech and mannerisms.
South Louisiana.
Probably my cooking.
I love the flavors that come out of here.
Have you tasted my cooking?
Have you tasted Popeye's sweet heat butterfly shrimp? They start out.
Even though fried chicken is universally loved and enjoyed by many, it can easily be seen as a food associated with African Americans and not. Keep in mind that the next time that you are enjoying that amazing Nashville hot chicken, that even though everyone enjoys that food, it has a very disturbing history.
The only reason these things are even an issue is because nobody knows what white people eat. You've been very good at keeping that shit a secret amongst yourselves.
Food and politics.
Throughout history, candidates for public office have attended food events to meet voters and donors. In New Hampshire, it's a clam or lobster bake. In Ohio, spaghetti topped with chili. In Florida, arroz con pollo or barbecue. Any way you cut it, food and politics go together. So if you are going to run for office, you better learn the names of local foods and how to eat them. A key qualification for being a politician is a strong stomach.
Sugar withdrawal is like opioid withdrawal. That's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm Dr. Tracy Marks, a psychiatrist, and this channel is about mental health education and self-improvement. Today I'm going to talk about sugar addiction. I put that in air quotes because technically it's not really an addiction by psychiatric terminology, but behaviorally it's like an addiction. So I'm going to talk about ways you can determine or recognize if you have a sugar addiction and how you can break free of this. Why is this important from a mental health standpoint? Because with sugar withdrawal, not only do you get the physical symptoms like headaches, bloating, tiredness, but you can also get irritability, sadness even. It can even feel like depression or anxiety. If you research this topic, you'll see that excessive sugar increases the endorphins that your body makes. Endorphins are the body's natural opioids. It's what you experience with intense exercise, like a runner's high. Your body actually produces chemicals that are same structure as opioids. So how do you break this cycle? It gets a little tricky here. Sugar addiction is not always about consuming too many sweets. In fact, you can get addicted to sugar even if you don't have what you consider to be a sweet tooth. Many foods that we consume on a daily basis have added sugar. And some examples of these would be things like pasta sauce, soup, yogurt, salad dressing. Anything that says fat-free has added sugar to help it taste better. Then there's also sauces and condiments like ketchup, mustard, mayonnaise, even crackers. I mean, it's all over the place. And what's even a shame are the prepared frozen foods like lean cuisine and those types of things. They also have added sugar. So it's the presence of sugar in these foods that can contribute to you having or developing a sugar addiction. And here's some signs that you're addicted to sugar. You find it really hard to say no to sugary treats. You regularly crave foods even when you're not hungry. You get a short-term mood or energy boost when you eat the food and then it quickly crashes. If you try and cut back, you get really strong cravings or maybe even get withdrawal. And remember, this can apply to starchy foods as well, like French fries, because the high starchy foods have lots of carbohydrates that break down to sugars. So let's talk about how to reduce your sugar. You can always try and stop cold turkey, but that probably won't work because it's just too hard. What you want to do is retrain your taste buds to prefer savory foods. And you can do this by slowly eliminating the foods with the added sugars. Now, this will require you to read labels, And when reading labels, you want to look for any of the following items, and that will tell you that your food has added sugar. And some of these things are agave nectar, brown rice syrup, high fructose corn syrup, dextrose, evaporated cane juice, lactose, malt syrup, molasses, and sucrose. Now, some of these sugars are considered to be healthier types of sugar, or at least healthier than table sugar, because they have more nutrients in them and they're less refined. Table sugar goes through a refining process from sugar cane or sugar beets, whereas honey and agave nectar are usually consumed more in their original form, so that makes them healthier, less refined. But don't be fooled into thinking you've made a good move because you've switched from table sugar to organic raw honey. At least not if you're trying to reduce your sugar intake. Sugar's sugar, and all you've done really is substitute one form of sugar to another form of sugar, even if that other form has more nutrients in it. And remember, almost all packaged food has some type of sugar in it. And this would be things like lunch meat or the frozen meals or even breakfast sausage. So it'll take some discipline and work to remove these things from your diet, but just as with any habit, it'll get easier and more routine and automatic for you the more that you do it. So how about trying this? This is a good start. Over the next month, try and substitute your high carb, high sugar meal with something closer to whole food. So for example, if you're used to eating toast with jam for breakfast, or bagel or muffin, try adding in or even replacing that with a boiled egg. When you add in proteins and healthy fats, you get satisfied quicker and you lose the need to want to fill up with the high sugary meal. So the idea is if you feel full sooner, you won't need or won't crave more toast to feel satisfied. So a word on sugar substitutes. If you're looking to drastically reduce your sugar intake, you don't want to use sugar substitutes to help you do that. Why? Because sugar substitutes like stevia, aspartame, agave, for example, all keep your food still tasting sweet. They don't help you reset your taste buds, and that's really what you need to do. But more importantly, sugar substitutes are linked to metabolic syndrome, and I'll have a reference to that in the description. Metabolic syndrome is a set of symptoms that include high blood pressure, high blood sugar, high cholesterol, and abdominal fat. And if you have any, or especially all of these conditions, it increases your risk of developing diabetes and heart disease. So drinking several diet sodas a day doesn't mean you won the sugar war. In fact, you've just switched from one poison to another one. So if you're going to reduce your sugar intake, you need to go all the way. Go full boat. Don't rely on the sugar substitutes. So you're going to need to do this gradually. And you could start with the big things like the desserts, and then gradually go into eliminating the processed foods with the added sugars in them. Now, you do need to take that step, because if you don't eliminate the processed foods, you'll still crave those desserts and other sugary foods that you worked really hard to get rid of. My last point is you do need to keep your expectations realistic. It's not possible to consume zero sugar. We still get fructose from fruit and glucose from the breakdown of carbohydrates such as vegetables and grains. So what you're trying to do or accomplish here is reducing the added sugar sources so that you don't overconsume sugar. And once you get accustomed to only consuming the natural sugars that are found in fruits and vegetables, it'll be hard to tolerate the added sugar that you get from the processed foods. And that would be a great place to be, where things just taste too sugary and you don't even want them anymore.
Frederick Douglass on how slave owners used food as a weapon of control. American writer, abolitionist, and orator Frederick Douglass edits a journal at his desk, late 1870s. Douglass was acutely conscious of being a literary witness to the inhumane institution of slavery he had escaped as a young man. He made sure to document his life in not one but 3 autobiographies. Holton Archive Getty Images Hide caption toggle caption Holton Archive Getty Images American writer, abolitionist, and orator Frederick Douglass edits a journal at his desk, late 1870s. Douglass was acutely conscious of being a literary witness to the inhumane institution of slavery he had escaped as a young man. He made sure to document his life in not one but 3 autobiographies. Holton Archive Getty Images President Trump recently described Frederick Douglass as an example of somebody who's done an amazing job and is being recognized more and more, I notice. The president's muddled tense, it came out sounding as if the 19th century abolitionists were alive with a galloping Twitter following, provoked some mirth on social media. But the spotlight on one of America's great moral heroes is a welcome one. Douglass was born on a plantation in eastern Maryland in 1817 or 1818. He did not know his birthday, much less have a long-form birth certificate to a black mother and a white father. He was parceled out to serve different members of the family. His childhood was marked by hunger and cold, and his teen years passed in one long stretch of hard labor, coma-like fatigue, routine floggings, hunger, and other commonplace tortures from the slavery handbook. At 20, he ran away to New York and started his new life as an anti-slavery orator and activist. Acutely conscious of being a literary witness to the inhumane institution he had escaped, he made sure to document his life in not one but 3 autobiographies. His memoirs bring alive the immoral mechanics of slavery and its weapons of control. Chief among them, food. Hunger was the young Fred's faithful boyhood companion. I have often been so pinched with hunger that I have fought with the dog Old Nip for the smallest crumbs that fell from the kitchen table, and have been glad when I won a single crumb in the combat, he wrote in My Bondage and My Freedom. Many times have I followed, with eager step, the waiting girl when she went out to shake the tablecloth, to get the crumbs and small bones flung out for the cats. As a young enslaved boy in Baltimore, Frederick Douglass bartered pieces of bread for lessons in literacy. His teachers were white neighborhood kids who could read and write but had no food. At 20, he ran away to New York and started his new life as an anti-slavery orator and activist. Holton Archive Getty Images Hide caption toggle caption Holton Archive Getty Images As a young enslaved boy in Baltimore, Frederick Douglass bartered pieces of bread for lessons in literacy. His teachers were white neighborhood kids who could read and write but had no food. At 20, he ran away to New York and started his new life as an anti-slavery orator and activist. Never mind, honey, better day coming, the elders would say to solace the orphaned boy. It was not just the family pets the child had to compete with. One of the most debasing scenes in Douglass' first memoir, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, describes the way he ate. Our food was coarse cornmeal boiled. This was called mush. It was put into a large wooden tray or trough and set down upon the ground. The children were then called, like so many pigs, and like so many pigs they would come and devour the mush, some with oyster shells, others with pieces of shingle, some with naked hands, and none with spoons. He that ate fastest got most, he that was strongest secured the best place, and few left the trough satisfied. Douglass makes it a point to nail the boastful lie put out by slaveholders, one that persists to this day, that their slaves enjoy more of the physical comforts of life than the peasantry of any country in the world. In truth, rations consisted of a monthly allowance of a bushel of third-rate corn, pickled pork, and poorest quality herrings, barely enough to sustain grown men and women through their backbreaking labors in the field. Not all the enslaved, however, were so ill-fed. Waiting at the glittering table of the great house, a table loaded with the choicest meats, the bounty of the Chesapeake Bay, platters of fruit, asparagus, celery and cauliflower, cheese, butter, cream and the finest wines and brandies from France, was a group of black servants chosen for their loyalty and comely looks. These glossy servants constituted a sort of black aristocracy, wrote Douglass. By elevating them, the slave owner was playing the old divide and rule trick, and it worked. The difference, Douglass wrote, between these favored few and the sorrow and hunger-smitten multitudes of the quarter and the field was immense. The hunger-smitten multitudes did what they could to supplement their scanty diets. They did this by hunting, fishing, growing their own vegetables, or stealing, says Frederick Douglass Opie, professor of history and foodways at Babson College, who, of course, is named after the activist. In their moral universe, they felt, you stole me, you mistreated me, therefore to steal from you is quite normal. If caught, say, eating an orange from the owner's abundant fruit garden, the punishment was flogging. When even this proved futile, a tar fence was erected around the forbidden fruit. Anyone whose body bore the merest trace of tar was brutally whipped by the chief gardener. But if deprivation was one form of control, a far more insidious and malicious one was the annual Christmas holidays, where gluttony and binge drinking was almost mandatory. During those 6 days, the enslaved could do what they chose, and while a few spent time with distant family or hunting or working on their homes, most were happy to engage in playing sports, fiddling, dancing, and drinking whiskey. And this latter mode of spending the time was by far the most agreeable to the feelings of our masters. It was deemed a disgrace not to get drunk at Christmas. To encourage whiskey benders, the masters took bets to see who could drink the most whiskey, thus getting whole multitudes to drink to excess. Frederick Douglass, circa 1879. George Warren National Archives hide caption toggle caption George Warren National Archives Frederick Douglass, circa 1879. George Warren National Archives. The nefarious aim of these revels was to equate dissipation with liberty. At the end of the holidays, sickened by the excessive alcohol, the hungover men felt that we had almost as well be slaves to man as to rum. And so, Douglass wrote, we staggered up from the filth of our wallowing, took a long breath, and marched to the fields feeling, upon the whole, rather glad to go, from what our master had deceived us into a belief was freedom, back to the arms of slavery. Douglass sounds even angrier at these obligatory orgies. He calls them part and parcel of the gross fraud, wrong, and inhumanity of slavery than at other, more direct forms of cruelty. It was a form of bread and circus, says Opie. Slaves were also given intoxicated drinks, so they would have little time to think of escaping. If you didn't take it, you were considered ungrateful. It was a form of social control. When he was about 8 years old, Douglass was sent to Baltimore, which proved to be a turning point. The mistress of the house gave him the most precious gift in his life. She taught him the alphabet. But when her husband forbade her to continue, teaching slaves to read and write was a crime, she immediately stopped his lessons. It was too late. The little boy had been given a peek into the transformative world of words and was desperate to learn. He did so by bartering pieces of bread. He had free access to it. In Baltimore, the urban codes of slavery were less harsh than in rural Maryland for lessons in literacy. His teachers were white neighborhood kids who could read and write but had no food. This bread I used to bestow upon the hungry little urchins, who, in return, would give me that more valuable bread of knowledge, Douglass wrote in one of the most moving lines in narrative. This also shows the ingenuity of enslaved people, says Opie, and how they tricked and leveraged whatever little they had to get ahead. Today, when one thinks of Frederick Douglass, the image that springs to mind is of a distinguished, gray-haired man in a double-breasted suit. It is difficult to imagine him as a half-starved boy garbed in nothing but a coarse, knee-length shirt, sleeping on the floor in a corn sack he had stolen. As he wrote in narrative, my feet have been so cracked with the frost that the pen with which I am writing might be laid in the gashes. It is a heartbreaking image redeemed by one little word, pen. A pen that he wielded with passion, clarity, and irony to gash the life out of slavery. Nina Martyris is a journalist based in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Okay. So you think this is olive oil, right? Wrong. Well, maybe some of it is, but this is actually a classic example of food fraud.
The extra virgin olive oils are being switched out with cheap ones.
And fraudulent to sell something labeled as something else.
Why is this fish being mislabeled?
Your Parmesan cheese products do not contain any Parmesan cheese.
As there was no one brand that stood out as completely safe.
Wow, so we can't eat anything.
I guarantee you, anytime a product can be passed off as something more expensive, it will be. It's that simple.
Counterfeits, dilution, substitution, and mislabeling. Food fraud not only harms consumers' wallets, it puts their health and safety at risk.
We might not know the overall impact of food fraud because so much of what fraudsters do is hidden from us and has been for centuries.
Some estimates say food fraud affects at least 1% of the global food industry, at a cost as high as $40 billion a year, according to the Food and Drug Administration.
Grocery Manufacturers of America estimated that 10% of the commercially available food in the United States is adulterated. That's 1 in 10. It means if you're not on that 8-item or less checkout line, you've got something in your cart when you leave the supermarket that's probably bogus.
Here's how and why fake food sits secretly in our kitchen cabinets. According to the FDA, food fraud is considered economically motivated adulteration, or EMA.
It's a monetary impact to the consumer and to the food manufacturers, but it's also a potential public safety, public health impact. It robs us of nutrients and can kill people and has done.
Larry Olmsted researched food fraud for years and published his book, Real Food, Fake Food, in 2016.
As I worked on this book, my definition of fake food became anytime what you buy is not what you think you're buying. Doesn't really matter whether it's legal or illegal. It's where you're being tricked. You're buying something that's not what you think it is.
The worst offenders can include seafood, meat, dairy, honey, alcohol, spices.
The fraud happens more with more expensive foods. Totally makes sense, right? There's a higher margin.
Take your extra virgin olive oil as an example. Fraud usually occurs here when a cheaper oil is added to the more expensive oil, and the label still reads 100% extra virgin olive oil. That's food fraud.
Olive oil has been adulterated for thousands of years because it is of high value and it is sought out.
They might flavor it with beta carotene and maybe color it with a little chlorophyll to make it a little more green. And so then you've got a lower quality, cheaper oil.
So both of these olive oils I got at the grocery store, and both of them are the store brand, but one cost way more than the other. This one had a label of 100% Mediterranean blend of extra virgin olive oil. So the olives were sourced from a bunch of different European countries, and it said it was packed in Italy, and there was no expiration date. And when I purchased this one was a 100% California extra virgin olive oil. First pressed, cold pressed, unfiltered, no artificial colors, preservatives, or flavors. And this one had an expiration date. It said that these olives were harvested in October, November 2022, and that it would be good on your shelf until August 2024. And it was much more expensive. Roughly twice as much as this olive oil. And this one had way more information about where this olive oil came from. Now let's look at the spice market as another one that's vulnerable to fraud. Think of an expensive spice, like saffron. This tiny amount cost me $20 at the store. Saffron can be bulked up with some other material like plant stems and sold as the same, according to the FDA.
Popular spices like basil and chili powder from a range of different brands.
Anything that's kind of colored orange, brown, and ground up can be passed off as turmeric.
It's the ultimate bait and switch.
And then there's fish. The FDA says seafood fraud can occur when a less expensive species of fish is substituted for a more expensive species. After all, it's kind of hard to know what fish you're buying, right?
If you're an experienced chef or fishmonger, you can look at like a red snapper fillet and tell whether it's red snapper, but 99% of consumers can't. You know, most of the fish we eat is white fish. Every fillet looks pretty much the same, which is why there's so much substitution. The FDA is mandated by law to inspect 2% of the imported seafood, which is, I think, a very, very low bar.
In fact, the U.S. imports as much as 85% of its fish.
But federal fisheries enforcement is serious business. Agents from NOAA and U.S. Customs tear open a container filled with frozen fish from Thailand. They're looking for fraud.
First, it's important to understand the matrix that food fraud lives in. There's intentional and unintentional types of food risk. Unintentional risks include food safety and quality, like accidental foodborne illnesses.
CDC estimates about 50 million people a year contract a foodborne illness. Only 20%, 1 in 5 of those can be identified. So there's 40 million people a year getting sick from something they ate that we don't know what it is, and a good guess would be that fraud has something to do with that.
Then there's intentional. That's where food fraud is alongside food defense. The difference is fraud is motivated by economic gain, and defense is motivated by harm.
If you have a ton of coffee and you can turn that into 1.2 tons by adding some cheap filler to it, you've just increased your profits by 20%. And a lot of these products pass through a lot of hands. They go from small growers to big trucks to tankers to boats to processing plants. It's not necessarily like this big company that's selling you coffee that's ripping you off. It can happen in a lot of ways along the way.
Even the FDA says it can't estimate how often this fraud happens or its economic impact. Over the last 10 years, the most common fraud committed is lying about an animal's origin and dilution or substitution, both ranking at 16% of incidents recorded. Dilution and substitution are exactly what they sound like. Perhaps somewhere along the supply chain, the real expensive process of refining something like fresh olives is ignored. Maybe a little canola oil is added instead. Then there's the removal of value, when an ingredient or part of a food is intentionally left out, taken out, or substituted altogether. And that substitute can be a non-food substance. That's the 14% of the recorded food fraud incidents using non-food substances.
The pandemic has given us a chance to focus on supply chains and forced us to.
For example, during the pandemic, labeling fraud really spiked in 2021 to 21% of the types of fraud that were committed and recorded.
If we knew all about it, why hasn't it been solved? The key was we weren't focusing on prevention. Food fraud prevention, if we do it right, is boring. We're the fire marshal checking exits and smoke alarms, not catching the bad guys.
The U.S. has laws in place to ensure food safety. That's part of what the FDA does today.
Basically, all food fraud, all product fraud is illegal under one law or another, somehow.
Before the FDA existed, manufacturers could add basically whatever they wanted into the food. Think of Upton Sinclair's The Jungle. That book was published in 1906. That same year, food safety regulation began with the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drugs Act, which outlawed adulterated and misbranded food items.
To protect consumers,
This ultimately led to the creation of the FDA.
the Food and Drug Administration and the
Since then, laws have hit the books to further food safety protocols, like the Food Safety Modernization Act signed into law in 2011.
And then horse meat hit.
The fraud was on a grand scale.
Horse meat was blended into beef in the UK, across Europe,
and sold to unsuspecting supermarkets for a period of 8 months in 2012. The scandal was exposed.
And that was a great wake-up call.
Some companies purposely mislead on labels.
Prosecuting the fraudsters committing the crime can be tricky. After all, they're purposely trying to avoid that detection. But criminals are caught. Like in 2016.
Product labeled Market Pantry 100% Parmesan contained cheaper Swiss and cheddar cheese and an organic filler called cellulose, which can be derived from wood pulp.
Castle Cheese was caught adding wood pulp and cheddar to its grated Parmesan that they sold as 100% Parmesan cheese.
The FDA does allow fillers like cellulose in cheese, but it can only make up 4% of the total ingredients.
The president of the company got a $5,000 fine, 200 hours of community service, and 3 years of probation.
For its part, the Food and Drug Administration says its job is to make sure food doesn't hurt you, not to police the labels.
Fraud is tough for the consumer in terms of food because it's difficult. They don't have a lab in their kitchen.
The Food Fraud Prevention Think Tank has a 5-question survey consumers can use when shopping for food. 1. What type of product is it?
Be aware of product that you put on you, in you, or plug in the wall.
2. Quality. Can you recognize the difference between the products? If you can't easily tell the difference, that makes you more vulnerable to fraud.
If I drink scotch, I couldn't tell you if it's a difference between a $50 bottle and a $5,000 bottle. So I know I could be deceived at that point.
3. Supplier. Do you know the retailer or the supplier? And do you trust them?
So when you turn that box of cereal or bottle of juice over and read the back, there's a lot of information there that's required by law that's helpful to the consumer.
And then question 4. Are you buying this item online? The supply chain can be shrouded in more mystery when shopping online. So how did you find out about this website? Is it reputable?
But it depends on how you find that supplier.
And finally 5, complain. Okay, it's not a question, but the Food Fraud Prevention Think Tank says if the retailer is legit, they will want to know.
I think manufacturers can be the victims as well.
The FDA also relies on consumers' reports.
In recent decades, fraudsters have gotten more sophisticated in the techniques they use to fake the food products. And that means that our detection methods and our test methods and standards have to be better at detecting fraud.
That's why the U.S. Pharmacopoeia Convention provides a framework for organizations to detect its vulnerabilities.
We have food fraud mitigation guidance, so it is a supply chain risk management tool to really take a look at which ones are the more risky products suspected to be adulterated.
Sometimes it feels like this is not that big of a deal. But the more fraudsters are able to achieve, the more we end up paying in the end as consumers.
These cases rarely result in criminal penalties. If you want to be like a drug dealer and import heroin and you get arrested on a large scale, you're going to go to jail. But if you can make $80 million importing adulterated honey, and then you're going to get a slap on the wrist and some fines, why wouldn't you do food instead of drugs if there's no basically criminal downside to it? So as long as we don't take it seriously, why should the perpetrators take it seriously?
What we want is the food industry just to be focused on making food and not have to worry about looking over our shoulder, checking different suppliers. And that's going to impact more food being produced, better food, safer food, less expensive food. There's plenty of things for us to worry about in the world today, and food fraud should not be one of them.
In American politics, what you eat and how you eat it is a big deal.
Candidates are out in force on the campaign trail, eating and eating and eating.
So big that one little mistake could possibly sink your entire presidential campaign. Well, supposedly.
There was that gaffe with the tamale that cost him the state of Texas. Carter won Texas, and Carter won the presidency. And it may have been a tamale that did it.
Hey, I'm Yara. Ding. Let me explain. American politicians spend a lot of time eating food and talking about food on camera.
Big gay ice cream is the best.
They've been doing it for years.
I do not like broccoli.
And believe me, they eat and drink all the things.
It's a little slice of heaven.
Oh, the thing.
I always used to eat milk bones as a kid. Come here.
But the stakes are high. One wrong move, one food gaffe, and suddenly you're at the center of a storm that could possibly hurt your entire campaign.
The New York Times today has reported Senator Amy Klobuchar eating a salad with a hair comb.
With the comb.
So if public eating is so high risk, why do so many politicians eat in front of the camera? And why do we care so much what they put in their mouths? I took my questions to George Washington University, where I met Laura Brown, a political scientist who's done some serious research on political campaigns.
We are seated before a very historic table.
It was once owned by Abraham Lincoln.
Oh my God. And now it's in your office.
In my office.
It's in your office of all the other offices. That's amazing.
Right, the questions.
It seems like campaigns make a point of showing their prime presidential contender eating food on camera.
Ooh, my goodness.
Talking about food.
I love street food, and I think I developed that living in the third world.
What you're trying to do is relate to the many different communities that exist within this country.
So, masala dosa.
The flavor is very nice.
Thank you.
Food is the way that people connect with each other. Candidates are trying to say, I'm in your community. I get you, and I enjoy your traditions with you.
What flavor ice cream you were eating there?
It was American Dream. It was.
And it seems like there's this focus on ordinariness.
Particularly in the last 40 years, after Vietnam and after Watergate, insider, elite presidents kind of went out the window in favor of these outsiders and people who could claim that they were not part of the Washington experience. Then really what started to matter was not, are you somebody I look up to, but are you like us?
Crafting that non-elite, average Joe or average Jane image is a pretty well-coordinated effort these days.
I'm Ted Cruz. I'm Ted Cruz. I'm Ted Cruz. I'm Ted Cruz, and I approve this message.
It's led by a group of campaign staffers known simply as the Advance Team. Advance Team. Advance teams are masters at planning events and staging photo ops. They'll scout out where a candidate will go.
You guys want some?
What they'll do.
Mom, what do you want? Chili dog, Valerie?
And, of course, what they'll eat.
How's that sandwich? You get that in Ohio?
And they'll make sure journalists are invited.
I bet these reporters would like to.
But there's one food event they'll make sure their candidate absolutely attends.
And it starts right here in Iowa.
The Iowa State Fair.
The reason why the Iowa State Fair is so important is because it's in Iowa. Iowa is the first state to actually go to the polls and do any sort of voting.
All eyes on Iowa. The first in the nation caucus in the Iowa caucus.
And how you do in the Iowa caucuses could eventually give you the momentum to become your party's nominee.
Because of that, candidates needed a place where they could meet and mingle with other Iowans, and the state fair was just the perfect place for it.
And I'm psyched for the eats, even as a vegan.
There is no more specialty dish at the state fair than whatever it is on a stick. Because if you put it on a stick, you can walk around the fair and eat at the same time.
And it's often fried foods, right?
They'll fry Snickers bars, Oreos. They fry butter and then put it on a stick.
And corn dogs. Lots and lots of corn dogs.
So to be seen with a fried object in your hand at that fair,
yes,
is a really big deal.
It is. All of those moments are about trying to say, I'm just like you, and we're all in this together.
But what happens when you eat something the wrong way, and that carefully crafted average Joe image comes crashing down? I'm talking about food gaffes, or food faux pas. Turns out there's someone who wrote her entire PhD dissertation about the role of food and food gaffes in American elections. One of her arguments is that
food is so symbolically rich. It's this like really easy device that you can use to craft this like public sensibility about who you are.
Basically, what you eat can be used by the media or political elites to show how relatable and middle class you are.
We're gonna go get some burgers. One cheeseburger and one fries.
Or how elite and unrelatable you are.
Billionaires in wine caves should not pick the next president.
Gucci wearing, latte drinking,
latte sipping,
latte liberal.
Does what you eat have an impact at the polls?
I mean, in the everyday grind of running for president, you go to the Iowa State Fair, you host a ton of events in diners. If you're doing it right, you only hear about it in like that place and in that moment in time.
This is all food for thought.
I'm not going to hear about it. You're not going to hear about it. The folks who live there will, but it's not a story, but it sort of fizzles out. When it doesn't fizzle out, however, is when something goes wrong.
With like food gaffes and blunders.
With food gaffes and blunders. And the candidate does something to suggest that he or she is really just sort of like play acting.
Pandering.
Pandering.
As you know, hot dog is my favorite meat.
If it maps onto an existing media narrative of that candidate, it becomes this weirdly sticky story.
Who let the dogs out?
But what are some of the most disastrous examples of food gaffes? I figured I'd run through a few with my interlocutors.
We're gonna play a special game where I show you pictures of American politicians committing food gaffes.
Yep.
And I want you to guess what they are and explain exactly what happened. Ready to go?
Oh boy, let's do it.
Boom, voila.
Oh, yeah, I mean, obviously.
This is a very, very famous moment. This is President Gerald Ford campaigning in South Texas.
And something isn't going right.
He attempted to eat a tamale with the corn husk on.
Every newscast in Texas, all they did was show Gerald Ford not knowing how to eat a tamale.
And this was like in 1976 when he was running against Jimmy Carter.
Mike Huckabee famously said that this sunk his presidential effort.
Carter won the presidency, and it may have been a tamale that did it.
I mean, no, one little thing didn't, but it was really sort of about his broader inability to connect with people. Oh, this is close to my heart because I'm from Philadelphia. So this is John Kerry.
Running for president, makes his stop in Philadelphia, and he orders his Philly cheesesteak with Swiss cheese.
The traditional way that you order cheesesteaks in Philadelphia is with whiz, which is like an orange cheese product.
And this caused an outrage.
Yes. Yeah. Because it seemed to fit with all of the cliches about John Kerry, that he was something of an elitist.
You also don't put lettuce and tomatoes on it.
Despite this incident, though, Kerry went on to win Pennsylvania by about 2 points.
This.
John Kasich on the campaign trail eating pizza with a fork and knife.
At Gino's Pizzeria in Queens.
Boy, this is good.
It is a food that 99% of the time you eat with your hands.
I think Bill de Blasio has done that.
Sarah Palin.
Donald Trump.
If you're going to use food to connect with voters, you need to connect with them in the way they eat it.
This is Hillary Clinton running for president in 2016. She's on The Breakfast Club.
What's something that you always carry with you?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, by all accounts, this is a woman who loves hot sauce and who actually does carry hot sauce around in her bag.
I eat a lot of hot peppers. I, for some reason, started doing that in 1992.
But it felt so pandering in the moment because she's on The Breakfast Club.
Listen, I just want you to know, people are going to see this and say, okay, she's pandering to black people.
Okay. Is it working?
And because like Formation had just come out.
I got hot sauce in my bag, swag.
And what's interesting about these gaffes is that for the people who already have like this vulnerability around their authenticity, the gaffes stick.
As millennials, your voice is important. I, Hillary Clinton, share all of your exact same beliefs, and I always have.
So yeah, as you can see, eating in public can be fraught. But that begs the question, is any form of on-camera eating pandering? If you're eating in Iowa, aren't you pandering to the state's rural white population? If you eat at Sylvia's restaurant in Harlem, New York, are you pandering to the black community? And if you're... let's not go there.
This country is large and contains multitudes, and you're having to appeal to folks all over whose lives and foodways and food cultures are so different and idiosyncratic and distinct. It's part of campaigning. I mean, it's part of just trying to reach out and make a connection with folks. But again, where I really think it flips a switch for people is where it just feels more deeply dishonest than like an earnest effort to make a connection.
I'm learning to say y'all, and I like grits. I got started right this morning with a biscuit and some cheesy grits.
For candidates who want to run for office in the United States, what tips would you have?
I would say don't avoid food because food is such a core way that we connect as humans.
But there's a second, more important tip.
Don't lie. Avoid those situations where what you're doing is so clearly not a reflection of who you are.
Hot dog is my favorite meat.
Just be yourself.
Just be yourself.
Hold on, this got messed up.
If you're going to make mistakes, have them be mistakes that are kind of authentic to you.
I did not realize this coconut milk needed to be like stirred up like this.
There are folks who do something wrong that's kind of benign wrong, which is, you know, a John Kerry ordering Swiss cheese. Like, the guy just likes Swiss cheese. And now let's sort of like juxtapose that to the de Blasio situation.
She's talking about the mayor of New York City.
Mayor de Blasio tweeted his favorite bagels are from Bagel Hole in Park Slope, where his order is whole wheat toasted extra cream cheese. The only problem,
We don't toast our bagels?
Bagel Hole doesn't even have a toaster.
And so here in this moment, it's like such a stupid lie, but it reveals that he uses food to try to create the sense of who he is, but that he's sort of willing to lie in the service of accomplishing that. You start to create a sense of uncertainty around your authenticity as someone who is willing to lie for the purpose of getting votes.
I guess a lot of this comes down to the age-old saying, honesty is the best policy. Yeah.
Cake. The origins of the expressions, that takes the cake, that's a cakewalk, and that's a piece of cake, all come from a competition. In the late 19th century, African Americans in the South created what they called a cakewalk competition for formal events. A couple would walk a course in the most creative way in front of judges, and the winner of the event took home a decorative cake as the grand prize.
الأسبوع الواحد نستقبل 17 حالة أقل تقدير. سوء تغذية حاد وخيم، لا متوسط عاد ولا عاد يعني في المستوى الطبيعي، حاد وخيم جدا العظم.
احنا نطبخ اوراق الشجر وناكل من الشجر وننطق من الشجر صلاه على النبي. يعني هنا ما يقول لك يعني تغذيه ما بوش تغذيه خماد موت في هذا المكان.
Hey!
the situation of the families without any job, without any income, with no salaries for public employees, and in the middle of the war is catastrophic.
Okay, now, former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger approves of the IMF structural adjustment and USAID programs. He once, which is the main source for genetic engineering and pesticides around the world, he once portrayed American aid this way: to give food aid to a country just because they are starving is a pretty weak reason. Kissinger is the instrument, the person who helped manufacture U.S. foreign policy for 5 decades now. And to think that he's right in what he says here, not morally right, but he's right that this is what U.S. aid is about. It's about ways of taking over land in other countries, booting people off their land. We're not giving them food aid to feed them. We're giving it for other reasons. So for Kissinger, food is to be used as a weapon in the achievement of U.S. foreign policy objectives. And so the United States systematically dumps cheap, genetically engineered products saturated with pesticides on foreign markets, undermining local producers and forcing them to purchase the patented seeds from the company manufacturing them. They're not allowed to replant them, along with the pesticides needed to kill off the plant's competitors. Driven from their lands, local producers become dependent on the United States and its corporations, and a number of them try to flee across the border to the United States. On the other hand, people know Anthony Bourdain, the world-famous chef who died, was it last year? I'm not going to speculate here for the purposes of this talk. He wrote, once you've been to Cambodia, and who knew this about Anthony Bourdain? Once you've been to Cambodia, you'll never stop wanting to beat Henry Kissinger to death with your bare hands. You will never again be able to open a newspaper and read about that treacherous, prevaricating, murderous scumbag sitting down for a nice chat with Charlie Rose and attending some black tie affair for a new glossy magazine without choking. Witness what Henry did in Cambodia, the fruits of his genius for gamesmanship. And you'll never understand why he's not sitting in the deck in The Hague next to Milosevic. Shortly before he died, and we can all speculate about all sorts of things from that. This is a piece I wrote, which is, some of it is reprinted in the book called The West Nile Story, in which in New York we blocked the spray trucks, we went the lawsuits route. It's really important for activists. Many of the mainstream environmental groups refused to help us to stop the spraying, whether it was NRDC, went and visited them like half a dozen times. No. There were other mainstream groups, large corporate mainstream groups, environmental groups. They didn't want to touch it. And then, anyway, this is, who is this? Yes, this is Rachel Carson, true hero of our movement. Her book in 1962, Silent Spring, intersected with the mass movement that was happening at the time. One of the things to learn from that movement against DDT and for the banning of DDT in the United States, which involved all these people marching. I mean, it was her story was put out week by week in the New Yorker. And so people read it in sequels rather than all at once before the whole book came out. And it was quite incredible that she kept going and analyzing what was going on. But also, are people aware that it wasn't only about DDT? It was also about the nuclear bomb testing as a result of the Cold War in the United States, which was poisoning, the strontium-90 levels were poisoning the children throughout the country, the milk supply throughout the country. And that was a fundamental part, along with DDT, of what Rachel Carson and the movement were demanding and marching and mobilizing everywhere. And it was, again, many, many young women who were part of this movement. There were men, too, who were part of it, but it was initiated by women, again. So I always like to remember Rachel Carson. Now this, okay. We're coming near the end, and I wanted to mention, this is the FDA badge, the Food and Drug Administration badge. It is actual badge that we stole, liberated from the FDA officials at one point. Well, we say that FDA means for direct action. And people in Boston and in other parts of Massachusetts took these. You notice the picture proves who you are, right? It's the picture. And it's signed by the Commissioner of Health at the time and the Commissioner of the FDA at the time. And they went into, I was not part of this particular one, they went into stores throughout the area dressed in zoot suit, in those radiation suits, and went in with Geiger counters and everything, and would say, sorry, we have to shut down your store. You have to get rid of these. You have to get rid of these products, and shut down, or else shut down the store. And it was whatever products that they knew were genetically engineered. So they went to product after product after product and told the store managers to get rid of them. And they had the official badge, and here's my proof. And of course, they see their picture, so of course it's true. And and they managed to succeed in shutting down several stores. In Tennessee, these type of creative actions are going on everywhere. In Tennessee, there was another small group of activists who decided to rewrite the law book. So you know those McKinney law, their black leather-bound law books. So they got one, and they rewrote the first few pages of it, and they just inserted it nicely so it looked real. And it said on number 1, you cannot sell food that has been derived from genetically engineered products, crops, or bovine growth hormone in the store. And they shut down store after store after store in Tennessee. The owner of the store would come up and say, well, it doesn't say that. That's not in the law. What are you talking about? And they say, yes, it is. Here's the law. And they'd open up the book, and they show it to them right there in black and white where it says that. And they succeeded in shutting down, I think it was 5 or 6 stores, big ones, before they got wind and they had to get run out of town with guns pointing at them. But it was quite a great tactic. In New York, we blocked spray trucks that were poisoning everybody. A lot of the spray truck drivers were getting sick from the spraying themselves. California, they were spraying marijuana crops and marijuana fields. People shot down the helicopters. I'm not advocating or not advocating anything. I'm just saying what happened. And to try and get us to think about, to break out of the way of thinking that we have to only march in a street where nobody's watching and nobody's listening, and chant at windows where nobody is sitting, and then go home the next day, which is what a lot of the demonstrations are about these days. We can do a lot more than that. And just with friends, even with a small group of people, just be creative and have fun. And it's fun fighting against these bastards. It's like, if you don't enjoy it, what's the point in it, as well as doing something good for the world and for ourselves? So we are a prisoner of the universal price codes, right? The private patenting of everything. This is, I had put these on trees all around New York City when they were putting price codes on trees when they were trying to privatize the parks in New York and have them be taken over by or run by private corporations or named by private corporations. And this is from what it looked like during our fight against the spraying. Okay, so I'm gonna, I'm sorry, I'm just running through the last of the pictures I pulled out. This is the actual sheep meadow in Central Park. This is why it's not photoshopped. This is why it was called the sheep meadow. There used to be sheep grazing there. When we went to Prospect Park, the head of Brooklyn Parks, back when, like 15 years ago, and asked him to stop spraying in the parks, they go, well, what are we going to do? What can we use instead? And we said, well, why don't you use sheep? Well, why don't you use goats? And, you know, this picture was part of that. And they just laughed at us. You know, what? Use goats? Are you crazy? Blah, blah, blah. I tell this story in the book also. And now, finally, there were goats that were used the past few years in parts of Prospect Park who weeded the park in like record time. And it's just, and it was fun for kids to go up and see the goats at work and having fun and enjoying their life. So this is, this is part of the story of, there are all these, I don't know if you can see the cartoons from here. Can you actually see them? These are from John Jonick, who is, his main argument, in addition to being a great cartoonist, is that tobacco is the most pesticided plant on the planet. And there is something like, there's no tobacco in US cigarettes at all. It's all poison, synthesized. It's, unless you get the organic version of it. I don't smoke at all, but he does. And he smokes organic and his own tobacco. But the idea that people are told only that the tobacco itself is what's killing them, when it's also, additionally, and way more dangerously, the pesticides that are being used and the other chemicals that are put into these US cigarettes, again, which has no tobacco in it. So Mother Jones ran a great expose on that like 20 years ago, and they outlined the whole thing. But again, another thing that we don't know about.